All right, so let's have a look at the decision form. Every round you'll be provided with some pages of the resolution sheets, which are decisions that you have made as a board, and this decision form. So the decision form is a form of a decision, so it's part of your resolution sheet and will go into your board papers for the next round, and your resolutions are specific decisions that you've passed as a board. Okay, so normally you would also have a set of action items that come out of a board meeting, which would then usually be actioned by the management team. So in this form, what I'd like to do is just go through the different sections and highlight what is the scope of what you can do. This form in total is the sum total of what you can do in a round. Okay, there's nothing that you can decide to do that's not on the sheet. So this will also help sort out questions in your mind of what are the factors that you can influence. These are the decisions that you can make. So let's go through them area by area. The first is the marketing and sales area. What you can decide the price of your product in each of the regions, in dollars in America 1, 2, and 3, and in rupees in Pandau, and you can decide how much advertising to spend. So this is your advertising and marketing budget that you'd like to, or what you'd like to spend in a particular quarter. Okay, so those are the two you can do there. On the sales team, you can choose to hire new sales team members. You can choose to fire them and transfer them out or transfer them between regions. So for example, if you would like to fire someone in America 3, put -1 in the transfer and not have them transferred somewhere else, a +1 in the transfer column. So in that case, it will prompt you to say, right, that means you fired someone. If you'd like to transfer someone from America 3 to America 1, you do a -1 under America 3 and a +1 under America 1 in the transfer column. So you're transferring either someone out or you're transferring someone between regions or you're hiring new. Commission is your commission per unit in cents. Your salary is your dollar salary or rupee salary per month for your sales team. Okay, so those are the sales and marketing decisions you can make. The next block across is your financing decisions. So there are a number of instruments you can you choose to use to finance. Now, what we often observe is that some boards are very gung-ho in going and building plants and making investments, and yet do not sit back and say, well, what are the cash flow requirements for that, and therefore, do we have enough cash in our operating cash flow, or do we have to get an investment? And so, you know, that's what you have to do in real life, so let's do it that way. You can do a bank loan and an emergency loan, so that information is in the financial limits policy. You can issue bonds, or you can redeem bonds. In other words, issuing bonds means you sell bonds to the market. When you redeem the bonds, you buy them back. So if you have a minus in bond issue, that means you're pulling it back. If it's a plus, you're issuing bonds and therefore raising capital. If it's a minus, you are paying back loans. You can issue stock, and there are quite a lot of requirements around issuing stock in terms of how that process works. My advice to you is that in a private company, that's not going to be easily the source of funding you'd use to fund working capital and business growth. In a private company, it's just not how it works. So I would encourage you to think about, in a practical context, would that be something you would use? And if not, then don't use it. Dividends, you can issue dividends, and these are dividends to your external shareholders. And so it's your choice to issue those dividends. There are dividends that move internally. These are dividends externally to external shareholders. And then the time certificates of deposit are another instrument, and there's information on that in the pack. Research reports, so those are, if you'd like to order one in any particular cycle, you just tick it, and those will be ordered on the back end for you. Then the next part, which is a huge block, is the production decisions, which obviously is the nitty-gritty of a manufacturing concern. So let's have a look at the different columns, and then I have specific things I'd like to share with you on the production issues. Right on the far left, you can choose the research and development you'd like to invest in a quarter, and training. Training improves your productivity because your staff are now better at their production duties. R&D accelerates your ability to release new models and to bring out new quality and features and we'll talk about that specifically as well. And then we have the next set of columns is the model number. By default, everyone starts on model number 1. As you go along, you have a new model that becomes available, and you can make adjustments, and I'll talk about that shortly. Quality and features, everyone starts with level 2 quality and level 2 features for all regions. You can adjust that as you go along. So that is the particular product that you're providing, the slight differentiation in quality and features you're providing to each region. Sales office orders is the amount of stock that each office is ordering from the plant, and that's quite important to make sure you've got the amount of stock but not too much stock. So that's the sales office order. Production schedule are the number of lines you're producing and the number of hours. By default, you all start with 6 lines or 40 hours per line in your home region, America 1, 2, or 3. And as you go along, you can make adjustments to your production schedule. You'll also notice right at the bottom is a line that's entitled second shift, which is another way that you can make production decisions, and we'll cover that off shortly as well. The next section is called capacity adjustment. So if you'd like to make tweaks to your production schedule, you can lay off people on a line that's not in use. You can deactivate a line and then reactivate a line that has been deactivated. So those are capacity adjustments you can make. Our experience has been that unless you are overzealous and you open up too much production in a simulation that is relatively short as we experience it, it's unlikely that you'll use the capacity adjustment too much, unless, as I said, you've been a little bit too keen to switch on lines. And then construction is another way that you can do that, and we'll cover that off shortly. You can add new lines to an existing plant. If you have capacity, you can make a new addition. So you can add new capacity to an existing plant, or you can build a new plant. Okay, so you're putting numbers or you're putting currency into these blocks, and there is nothing other than this that we can influence when we put the numbers into the simulator tool. So let's have a look at some of the couple of the things that you can do just to refocus your attention on the different methods. The limits and policies around this are all included in that financial limits policy I mentioned. So for production, the quickest way you can get production going up is through overtime, and you would then have overtime in place for all lines. You can't choose for specific lines, and there are extra staff costs that are incurred. You can also add a second shift, which takes 1 quarter to train up those new team members. And so you're first putting a new shift in place, and then the following quarter you are then in production on that shift. You can decide how many lines you're putting into a second shift, and all the lines are always in increments of 2 for the entire simulator. So 2, 4, or 6 lines for a second shift. Unless you've already built an extra 2 lines on your plant, which means you have 8, for example, you can go up to 8 for the second shift. And if you have a look at your manufacturing report, your operations report, you'll see how many lines you have available. By default, everyone has 6 lines to start, with 2 lines available at the beginning of the simulation. So that means you could add 2 new lines to your home area plant, and it takes 1 quarter. So in the following quarter, your production capacity is ready. So a new addition is another way you could increase production. It's like building a new wing or a new section onto an existing plant to increase the size of the plant, of an existing plant. You can only do that in 2-line increments. So if you wanted to do a new addition and take your 8-line capacity to 10 lines, for example, you would put into the decision form 2 lines under new additions. It takes 2 quarters to build a new addition, and then the following quarter you would specify adding 2 new lines. So what you're doing is you're building the extra room or extra section, 2 new lines. Next quarter you are building 2 new lines. So you put 2L, or you add 2 lines to new lines, because you're now putting new lines into production. And then quarter number 2, you're ready for production. So imagine that your first quarter you're building the room. Next quarter, you're building the equipment, setting the equipment up and training, and the next quarter, you're live for production as a way of understanding new addition. You can also choose to add a new plant. So this takes 3 quarters to be live, okay, because it's quite an undertaking. So a new plant is in a new region. You can't put a plant in your home region. It must be in a different region from your own. It takes 3 quarters. The costs are allocated across those 3 quarters, as are for the new edition that's over 2, so it's allocated over 3, so plan your cash flow, and you then will also put in place your lines in the quarter before production. So visualize, you have 3 quarters that it takes to produce a new plant. The first 2 quarters of that period are building the plant facility. The last quarter is putting in place the equipment and the training, and then the following quarter we're now in production. Okay, so if you want to do a plant, it takes 3 quarters, and the cash is allocated across those 3 quarters as it prepares. There is equal payments for that, and the costs are listed in your schedule up front. You can also then reduce production capacity. You can close a plant, you can lay off staff temporarily, or you can deactivate lines. A layoff of a staff is used when you have created new lines and you haven't yet put them into production, which doesn't often happen, yet it can. You can build lines and choose not to produce. So that's what a temporary layoff would be. And deactivate lines, you can take lines that are in production, deactivate them, and then later reactivate them. But of course, each of those decisions have different cost implications as listed in your schedule. The other aspect I need to share with you is around how the new models works. So by default, everyone starts on quality 2, features 2. And so quality, there are 3 types. Number 1, quality is economy. Number 2 is standard. Number 3 is deluxe. The features, the amount of features, number 1 is basic. Number 2 is standard. And number 3 is enhanced, so lots of features. And those 3 levels on those different 2 dimensions have different costs associated with it. That's in the financial limits and spending policy. The way that you get available a new model is to drive R&D. So your R&D investment then switches on a new model, and you'll see in your operating report, you'll see Model 2 available. That means that you can now roll over to Model 2. Okay, if it only says Model 1, you aren't able to switch over to a new model. And so that's something to bear in mind as part of your production. You don't have to switch onto the new model if it's available. You can choose to stay with your own model. However, when you roll over from Model 1 to Model 2, what that effectively allows you to do is it allows you to specify the qualities and features to be shipped to each specific region. So you could choose America 1 as 1.2, America 2 as 2.3, America 3 as 3.3, Panda 1.1, but you can only make that adjustment when you roll out a new model. You don't have to worry about what happens to all the differentiation of stock. So this is a request to the plant to say for each of these regions, ship this specific combination of quality and features to each sales office. Okay, what the sales office has ordered from the plant. You don't have to worry about the stock. Typically what happens is that there is a background algorithm of how stock is sold out. It's sold out of the previous model until that's sold out, and then the new model gets shipped. Okay, gets put into the sales cycle. When you make the decision to roll over to a new model, production begins immediately, and then in the next quarter, sales can commence. The other production area is the sales orders. This is the amount of stock that the sales office orders from the plant, as I mentioned. If you run out of stock in a sales office, unfortunately, then there's no more stock until the next quarter. So you'll have orders that are unfulfilled. Unless you are in a region where there's a plant, in which case you can at any time draw on new stock. So offices that have a plant don't have to worry about running out of stock. And of course, you also want to make sure that you don't have excess stock, because it has a cost associated with it, because it has to be stored. So you've got to try and work through that as well. In terms of financing, couple of things to think about. There are surplus funds held by your subsidiaries that are transferred to your parent company in the form of dividends to that parent company. And so you'll notice that there'll be a dividends transaction, but that is the subsidiaries' flow of dividends to the parent companies. You've got to make the decision that you want to issue dividends to external shareholders from the parent company. And that's the financing decision that you have to make. All external financing, including bank loans, are undertaken by the parent company only, so you'll notice that on the balance sheet. And there also is a case where there are cash flow issues of a subsidiary. The parent company moves cash into the subsidiary, but takes a swap in shares. On your financial statements, it'll show it as the word stock. Obviously, it's not stock as an inventory. It's not the movement of inventory. It's a movement of shares. So if you are in a negative cash flow or you're needing an investment to make a plant in Pandau, what the parent company will do, it'll move the cash into Pandau, but it will take additional shares in the Pandau subsidiary as a security on that movement of cash. Okay, so if you see that on the balance sheet, that'll be what it's for. And those processes all happen automatically. Remember, the only decisions you can make are the ones that are on the decision form. The last thing I'm going to share with you is the Pro Score and the Z Score. These are two reports included in every pack and are your strategic measures. There are two types of measure. The Pro Score is a self-selected scoring system. It's the one that you choose right at the beginning, which represents your strategic decisions, how you weight your performance. What are the things that are important to you as a company, as a board, in terms of your performance and the things that you're going to measure yourself against? It is quite a complex formula. It is possible for you to get 0 on a score if you have a minus result and you're weighted against your other performances. So in other words, if you're a minus, you literally are removed from getting a score, and the other two companies or other three companies are reweighted based on their performance in a set of 3. So it is quite a complex formula, and so you don't necessarily have to unpack what it means. What you're looking for is understanding your overall trend, understanding how your specific weightings are moving from period to period, and really giving you a sense of the extent to which you are honoring the performance metric you've decided is important for your company. And what also is important is that as the results are cumulative over time, as you're making decisions from quarter to quarter, these metrics become more and more valuable and insightful. So initially they might be a little bit confusing. Over time they start becoming more meaningful to show the extent to which boards have honored their performance and their goals for their organizations. The Z score is a market selected standard scoring system, so everyone is measured against the same weightings and the same factors, and there are factors on how the market evaluates your performance, the things the market would look for in the organization, the things that it would be concerned about. And so this is in a way of understanding what would the outside world looking in think about your organization compared to your own internal view of your organization through the Pro Score. So two valuable metrics, and both complex. The Pro Score in particular is quite complex in how it weights performance relative to your position as 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the performance of the overall companies. So thank you for working through this board simulation webinar. There's a lot to learn, there's a lot to unpack. As you go through it, be aware of where you feel challenged and see that as a wonderful opportunity for development. Remember to always refer back to your detailed financial limits policy and overall expense sheet as a way of guiding you in your decisions, and realize that there's only so much you can do in the simulation. What you've got to do is you've got to focus yourselves as a board on the strategic decisions you're there to make, on understanding that alignment, that line of sight, and realizing the critical importance of a clear strategy, because then decisions become so much easier to make down the line. If you don't have a clear strategy, you'll end up having debates around how much commission and how many cents to allocate per unit. If you've got a clear strategy, those kinds of decisions become really easy in terms of rolling it out against a policy or a strategy. So enjoy the process, and as it evolves, there'll be a lot to learn, and good luck. May the best team win.